Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sreshtha, Purposefully Passionate about Domestic Abuse Awareness series. The intent of this series is to bring awareness to other types of abuse. Abuse is not only physical, abuse can be mental, emotional, economic, and a host of other things. We, as women and men too, go through different types of abuse, but nobody speaks about it. The intent of the series is to raise awareness that 1 in 3 women have been faced with gender based violence in their lives, and some of these persons may be sitting on your own timeline. By speaking about it and by sharing our stories and raising this awareness, my hope is that if we could at least help one person make a decision that would lead her to be a freer person, living her most true, authentic self, I would have completed my mission. All we can do as humans on earth is whatever little we can do. Today, I am really happy to have one of my friends share her story. Her name is Sam. Sam has a PhD in environmental biology from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. She was part of a 5-person team which completed the first ecological assessment of rivers across Trinidad and Tobago. Her work represents the first national survey for metals in water and sediment of rivers in Trinidad and Tobago and showed that human activities were the major source of these contaminants. Sam has also lectured part-time with the Department of Life Sciences, UWI St. Augustine, for both undergraduate and postgraduate programs, sharing her knowledge on pollution monitoring and assessment with the next generation. She is currently a national coordinator for the Global Environmental Facility Small Grants Program. So, welcome so much, Sam, and thank you for being brave enough to share your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And just sorry, before I go on, this is an anonymous interview to protect the person. So, go ahead.
Hi. So I've been in a sort of difficult situations in terms of relationships in the past, and my story started many years ago. I think as young people, when we're growing up, we contextualize our relationships based on our parents. And in my situation, I was very fortunate to have parents that were happily married and worked through the difficulties and the differences as people and, worked as a team. So, in other words, when you go into relationships, there's almost this blind or faulty idea that um, when you yourself get into relationships, that the people that you'll be in a relationship would behave in like manner, right? You don't know about abuse. You don't know about different types of abuse. You don't understand how people could take advantage of each other or disrespect each other or whatever. Because at the end of the day, when you come from a situation where if for the most part, with the relationship work, my grandparents worked, my parents worked, at their relationship work, it means that when it comes down to understanding what I went through, it was only years after I had left the marriage that I understood, the true impact of what, what I went through. So I met my ex-husband in whilst I was at university, and he was a very shy, very he hadn't done very well, and he struggled a lot with his education. And at the time that I met him, he was very insecure. And so when we started going to, well, we were in the same classes together, and we used to study together. And I had developed a liking. So the first thing, as I go along, what I'm going to try to do is give advice, because
Yes, yes,
what I've done, I think I would like to give advice. If I could advise a younger person, right?
yes.
So being in the context of studying together, whatever, you develop a rapport, and of course there was a natural affiliation or attraction between us. So it was something that we developed. We became really good friends, and I supported him a lot through the universities and whatnot. So much so that he came from entering the university feeling insecure, um, and not have he repeated CXA, he repeated A levels, to topping his class in at university. Okay, so
Okay.
it was a really sort of mutualistic relationship because we both benefited from the fact that we were strengthening each other in terms of our studies and that sort of thing. And so the relationship was there. Um, and so we went through the university, we graduated together. I met his parents. So he's Hindu, his father is a Pandit. I met his parents. So I already felt that because there was a religious affiliation to the family, that automatically meant that, it was a good family, right? And it's a good place to be. And, I would not have any issues with respect to a relationship or a marriage or whatnot. So where I went wrong, first of all, is I liked him more than he liked me. And it's only afterwards I realized that, the lesson that many people teach you, I didn't get. Nobody gave it to me at the time. But the lesson I would like to share to people out there, both men and women, is choose somebody who likes you as much as or more than you like them. And that's very, very important because it builds a stronger basis for the relationship. Um, and also they come with a certain level of commitment. You know that they're willing to work through issues or concerns or whatever that you may go through in your relationship. So that was the first lesson that I learned. The second lesson is that I've learned is that, this preconceived idea that if you go to temple or if you're very religious, um, that sort of guarantees, a secure relationship or good people. And I'm not judging anybody, in terms of in my experience. I'm not saying they're bad, but there was. I'm saying the perception has always been, well, if you go to a temple, you're you you are automatically good people. That's just basically thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so that is, I think was the second lesson that I saw myself learn down the road, right? So we went through university together. We did our masters together. Of course, I'm foot to foot with him all the way through. And uh, you know, eventually we get to the point where, I mean, it's like 6 years into the relationship, and you haven't asked me to marry you or anything else. I get concerned, right? And I'm like, so why aren't you asking? Why are we taking this to the next level? What's the limitation, right? And of course, I have a lot of we didn't date per se. Most of our interactions were at the university through school. And so, there's a lot of, concern from my parents that I'm affiliating with this person and he's not making any, moves towards, what to go forward. So I need to understand, what do we do? But the thing about it is that I use it a bit as a measure of me. I'm like, well, he doesn't want to marry me, so it has to be something that's wrong with me. So then became the whole, sort of self attacking and so on and so forth, because there's so many other women out there who, their boyfriends, husbands, whatever, their boyfriends are so committed, and I just can't, we've been in this process for like 5 6 years, and you're not making the move. Eventually he did, after we discussed it and whatnot, but I think he committed to the relationship. I got a sense that it was more of a commitment of the relationship because it was like no other choice. And I'll get to that part of the story later on.
Okay.
So eventually we got engaged and then we waited like 2 years. So that was another long period. So we were together about 8 years before we even got married. And, I used to look at um, and even when we did get married, I used to look at other people and in interactions, relationships. Up to now, I still do it, because up to now, I haven't been able to figure out what's a good recipe for a relationship. I don't know what's the ingredients. I still need to figure them out myself. And so I look at, relationships that are around me that are so successful, 20 years, and they're still very considerate and loving of each other. And I'm like, so what's the mix? I try to deconstruct what do they have that we didn't have. And if I have to answer that question in analyzing my relationship, it was because that both parties were not equally committed. So And I later learned, coming down to the end of the relationship, that my ex-husband was involved with someone else. It was somebody he was involved with before we got married, somebody that he had loved. And it's only then I realized that, I was literally just like the second choice. I was the replacement. Well, I couldn't have her, so I gotta have, I'll take this instead, right? And it wasn't in the same way of, well, I can't buy an iPhone, so I'll buy a Samsung, something, the latest phone. Not that kind of thinking in our minds. It was more of, well, I have to go on in life. I need to get married. So, I guess this should be the most possible result. So, lesson to learn out of that is that if you have to wait that long for someone, leave, right? If after 2, 3 years, this person has not made any sort of commitment to you, leave. Because the person that you want to be with has to be somebody who is enthusiastic to want to talk to you every day and want to work with you to make a life, and if the person that you're with right now is not doing that for you, do yourself a favor and leave. Love yourself first and leave. Because you don't need somebody else to love you. You need to love yourself first.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was my third lesson. So we got married and whatnot. But our marriage was punctuated with a lot of issues. Now, I am a very strong personality. And of course, he had started out not being very strong. So we had our personality clashes like you would expect in any other marriage. But there was limited effort I believe, on his part to try to work through our issues. He would literally shut down. He would disappear. So it would happen that, we'd have an argument. And in normal people relationships, you're supposed to talk it out. You get vexed, you quarrel. If you had to cuss each other out, you cuss each other out. But you come back and you talk. And, always, the prime rule is don't go to sleep vexed, right? That's another lesson out of this. Don't go to sleep vexed. Never go to sleep vexed. Don't take the problem of today into tomorrow, right? Work it through. And forgiveness is also a part of it, right? But we never did, we didn't really have that. He would get upset with me and not talk to me for weeks, days, you know. I would understand. I mean, I understand. I'm a strong personality. So if we are discussing and I'm trying to, we are exchanging and I don't agree with you, we will, you know, but there was no attempt to agree to disagree and move on kind of scenario. And that's another lesson. Relationships have to be agree and disagree. So it has to be that you work through your problems, but you agree to disagree too. So that was one of the major issues that we had. Um, Personality wise, we were one of those power couples. We were considered to be, so we were in a lot of social work and that sort of thing. We were in a temple and, we were the ones who were doing all the preparation for events, and I would MC the events, and oh my gosh. So we were extremely visible in society as being, uh, one of those couples that wouldn't that wouldn't end, right? And to be very honest, I'd never thought that our relationship would have ended. Um, but mostly because from my part, this is another lesson that from my part, I was committed. I had my head in it from day one. Um, and you know, I, I took my vows very seriously, very, very seriously. So throughout the relationship, you would forgive and you would forgive and you would forgive, but you wasn't getting that reciprocating sort of behavior, right? From him. Anyway, long story short, we were married for about 7, 8 years. Somewhere about the sixth or seventh year, we migrated. We lived away for a while, and that was great. Um, and then we came back, and when we came back, he drew very, very distant. And I mean, when I talk about distant, I'm talking about it wasn't it was gradual, but it was stark. It was very, 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 very strong distance. And um, I remember the birthday after we came back to Trinidad, I would never forget it. It was my birthday. We usually had the same plan: dinner and a movie, dinner and a movie. That was my thing, right? That's all I ever wanted: dinner and a movie. And he disappeared. He disappeared for the entire day. Um, he told me he had to go and see about something for his mother, and I just recall, I called his mother's house and she was home. So I'm
Mhm.
like, where did you go? You know? Um, and I asked him, and he just said he needed to clear his head, and I was like, okay. His thing always was about space. He always needs space, and I used to joke and tell him, well, you need to go on a starship or something, go Star Trek or whatever, because, I don't understand the concept of space. You made a commitment to be with someone, so you need to work through the issues. And anyway, it turned out that he had had somebody whispering in his ear. This was his significant other for years. So apparently she never left our relationship. It's three of us in a relationship. And coming on to the end of it, it was him and her, and I was, on the side. So all through the marriage, it was me and him as husband and wife, and she as the outside. And then it became him and her as a relationship, and I am the outside. And I don't know when I got demoted, even though I still had the contract that said I was married. I don't know when I got demoted. But somewhere along the line, I just started feeling like the maid. And, like somebody to be leave me now, go, 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 leave me now. That kind of behavior. And, um, uh, but the thing is, okay, so as a person with my kind of background, a Hindu background or whatever, you know, we are grown up as Indian women and Indian girls. You get married, you stay married to one man, that sort of thing. These are the rules, right? These are the rules that you have to follow. So divorce was something that never happened to in my family. And actually, uh, the way that we got married, just the fact that we was going to school together was something that was unheard of in my family. Most of my family was arranged marriage. So, I broke tradition by getting married to somebody that I had already kind of known before. And of course, in the minds of some of my family members, that kind of backfired because my choice, because I made a choice and I made a poor choice. Um, but but what we were taught growing up, coming back to that point, sorry, we were taught growing up that um, women are just supposed to, Indian women are just supposed to stay married and take the crap and, just stay quiet. We're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to, complain. We're just supposed to accept what we get and done the story. And you know, I that was a main driver for me staying in that relationship. And it was not until my mother and his mother said, why are you taking this crap? You're qualified, you have your own job, you can make your own money. See about yourself. We didn't, well, my mother is qualified as well. And she's like, but it doesn't make sense that you stick around and take that kind of nonsense. Um, but there's some steps in between, right?
Mhm.
The first step was that um, after we came back from away, he spent a lot of time throughout our relationship, but especially in those last 2 years, trying to alienate me from my family. So I remember, like, we used to try to go to visit my parents or whatever, at least once a weekend or twice a weekend, or once a weekend for the month, or twice a weekend for the month. Um, but so, suddenly it was like, we don't want to go there. We're not going there anymore. And don't talk to your mother about this, and don't tell she that, and so on and so forth. So I didn't feel like I could speak to my parents. That's the first thing. The second thing that he had done was that I had a really good friend. She was outspoken, she was rambunctious, she was lively, energetic, but she was outspoken, and she's not the type of person who would take crap from anybody. And she used to tell me, why are you taking this crap? this is not something that you should really. And I never used to listen to her because, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a nice, Dolahin, dedicated wife. This was my part that I had to play, especially seeing that I married into a family that was also religiously oriented. The father was a pundit, etc., etc. So there was protocols as a pundit wife and a pundit son, wife, and all of that. There were protocols to follow. So, he made me outright. He told me one day you have to choose. It's either your best friend or me. And, that was one of the worst days of my life and the worst decisions that I ever made. Because at the end of it all, I told him, okay, I chose you because I was desperate to save my marriage or whatever. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't even understand, you know, that this was a form of abuse. You alienated me from my family and my friends and preventing me from being able to talk to anyone. Is basically just it's a precursor to the abuse that you're going to lay out on me. So that happened. So slowly but surely, I couldn't talk to my family. I couldn't talk to my friends. And then, of course, all through this whole process, you're disappearing. You're gone for days. When you come, you will have a meal together. You will eat. And I used to prepare dinner, and then I would say, what, just go. If you have work, he'd say, I have work to do. So he would go to the study and do his work, and I say, okay, no problem. But in normal relationships, the husband might say once in a while, well, all right, I'll wash your wares for you. Or, because both of us working, both of us doing things. But I cook, I have to clean now, I have to prepare everything. So you gone to do what you're doing in the office or study or whatever, or you go on in the bedroom, and I'm there working. And it was like that. That was my routine, and I was very unhappy. I'll be honest with you. I was very unhappy, but I kept telling myself, this is your husband, this is your marriage. You just have to keep working at it, and maybe someday he will love you. Listen, hear the logic, yes? Maybe someday he will love you. Anyway, so he started distancing himself, and eventually he got a phone, an extra phone. So you have two phones. So it's like, so what? If new phone is for me and you alone and everybody else on the next phone? No, the new phone was for he and the girl. And they would be texting each other all these love notes and so on and so
So,
forth.
so you knew at this point in time about he was, I don't want to say brazen, but he was open that he was with somebody else at this point in.
No, okay, so what had happened, um, uh, a year before 2 years before our marriage ended, um, I had lent him my computer, and when he brought it back to me, I found a series of love letters between the two of them, right? In those days it was Skype, so he downloaded every single Skype message, and it was pages and pages and pages of these conversations, and in it was how much he loved this girl and how she was meant to be, and their love so divine, and how I am annoying and obnoxious, and so on and so forth. And when I approached him about it, he basically said, no, 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 that's not real. That's not true. You know, I that you see, the other issue, of course, and the reason why he could hide it is because the person that he ended up with was actually a relative of his, right? So he hid behind that relationship. No, 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 that's just my cousin. Don't worry about it. No, 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 that's just how we talk. And I'm like, cousins just talk like that, boy? I don't talk to my cousins so, right? What's this going on? I So that's the next stage of abuse now. You start to make me question myself because you understand, I understand what is right and what is wrong in a relationship. In my mind, I'm not going to be getting involved in an emotional relationship with anybody extra. I have my husband, I have my commitment to my husband. I'm sticking to that. So I'm not going to entertain no conversations with nobody. I ain't texting nobody else. I ain't messaging anybody else. And we're not doing any Instagram liking or whatever else that people is do these days and feel it's okay. It's not okay. Right? And so I'm not doing all of that. But he has now started into that whole process with somebody else who is um, related to him. And every time you speak to him now, I'm like, you're in a relationship with this girl. No, 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 no. no, that's just my cousin. No, don't worry about it. No, that's okay. And there's when the panic started to happen. I'm like, but my spider senses are telling me this is a relationship. This is not just people, talking strippiness, right? This is a full relationship. And I mean, when you say things like our love is divine and blessed and that kind of nonsense, that's relationship talk, right? So, I went to his father. I told his father. His father's like, no, 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 that's not true. You're probably just nagging him too much. I'm like, what? You know? So on one end, I can't go to my parents, right? Because I feel trapped. And I feel that, he will get more angry and alienate me more if I go to my family or my friends. And then I go to his father, and his father brushes me off completely. Completely. So I take all the evidence that I have. I actually print all the documents and the love letters and whatever. And I eventually took it to his father. I said, "You feel this is this is my head? I want to watch. Check this. Look at this. Is this correct?" And he goes, "Well, yes, I see it now. I see it now." So then it blew up. And when it blew up, he spoke to his father. His father spoke to him. Then I spoke to her father because I knew them. I spoke to her father, and he said, "Well, them is big people. You can't stop them." Like, what? That was, I was just aghast, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I was like completely aghast. I was like, what? So long and short story is that sometimes when you get married, the in-laws don't support you. And in this case, did not. So I was trapped. I literally was trapped. Can't talk to my parents. Fast I couldn't talk to my parents. Couldn't talk to them. And I had to make a decision, um, because he's going about like nothing going on, and he's sleeping. This is so funny. Eh? He had two phones. One phone for everybody else, including me, and the other phone was for her. And he would go to sleep, plunging this phone in his hand, and he would slip his hand into a pillowcase. So it's not like I could get access to the phone to see what they're talking about, right? Or messages or whatever. And that's the thing. Imagine at that point in time, I was so crazy. I'm actually thinking of checking your phone. So my point, my other piece of advice, if you ever feel insecure in a relationship and you feel that your partner is not being what's the word? Um faith
Honest or truthful or
or
faithful.
faithful, right? If you feel that your partner is not being faithful, don't go and check no phone, pack a suitcase and leave,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because as women, we go berserk. We start to do stupid things. We want to go and follow them, get a friend to follow them, do this, do that, go and want to check phone and take. No, darling, save your respectability, save your, you save your dignity. Pack a bag and leave. If he want you, he will come and get you. He will come and he will learn a lesson, right? And that is what I think where I went wrong. I really did try to get the phone or whatnot. I got it once. So a couple of messages that infuriated me even worse. And I mean, at the end of the day, it really brought up a bad, put me in a bad place. But I don't think I was always, proper in my responses, like, for example, I remember I call her, or I message her, the girl once, and I'm like, you're such a lying, and I start cuss. That doesn't make, look at what you're doing. This is a relationship. You're mashing up my marriage or whatever. And then I realized, you know what? She knew what she was doing. Me calling her and quarreling with her ain't no difference. It's not going to make a difference because she knew exactly what she was doing. And of course, you see, because she was so adamant in getting what she wanted, then she got other persons to support her. So I started getting text messages from random people saying, leave them alone, right? I used to get emails from people saying, leave them alone, right? I had an aunt tell me, I need to stop getting in their way. So I'm like, and all of this time now, I'm trying to figure out how to save my marriage, right? I carried my temple. He went and swear in front of the pundit there about 3 times. I warned he will stop doing this. And of course, never happened. Never happened.
actually, in a couple months before we got divorced, he had a really bad accident. So where he was damaged by fire. So he what happened is that he went outside, and I don't know what possessed him. He threw gasoline on a fire, and a wind blew at the same time, and it blew into his face, hands, and chest. He was bareback. And what happened is he lost his skin off of his face, his chest, and his hands. So we by this point in time we were separated, right? I had gone through that whole rigmarole of trying to get people to understand that, he was having an affair, even if it was an emotional affair at the time. He was having an affair with this woman, and it was inappropriate behavior. It was disrespectful to me. His family wasn't taking me seriously. Eventually, I remember one day I was just crying and crying because I didn't know what the solution was. What is the solution to this problem? And then eventually I called my mother and I told my mother. And my mother, that's when we started to talk. And my mother is like, well, you don't need to take this nonsense from him. What are you going to do? And I said, I don't know as yet. But I'm leaving here. And I remember I packed a bag and I left and I came to stay with my brother. And well, the circumstances of me leaving that day were extraneous. This was the only situation that he had ever attempted to be violent. So I came home one day from I was out. I don't remember exactly where I was when I came home. The house was empty, and I'm looking around because I'm like, so where's this person? The house is wide open, front door, back door, window, everything open. So I was like, what is going on here? You don't leave the house empty and go about, leave and go far. So I walk around the house and whatever, and my eyes turn to his phone, the phone that he has for this person. But he has his SIM card cut in pieces next to the phone. So I say, all right. So he cut up the SIM card. So he finally listened to me. This is about 2 years, after 2 years of this abuse. And then I go outside now because I'm seeing a wisp of smoke in the backyard. So I figure he's probably in the backyard. When I go out in the backyard, he has burnt all his love letters to her. Right? He burned them in this little bonfire that he have going. So I go, oh, okay, all right. So he cuts up the SIM card for the phone, right? Okay. So he comes to me now and he says, yes, did you see what I did for you? And I said, did for me? He says, yeah. I said, well, what did you do for me? Well, look, I've cut up the SIM card and whatnot. Um, I've made a decision that I'm going to end this and I'm going to come back into the marriage. I said, serious, that's good, that's nice. But I don't want to be here anymore. Right. And that's when I realized I had a voice. I was like, oh, well, if you want this marriage, I don't. So he goes, so what do you want? And that's when the words actually came out of my mouth. I want a divorce. I actually want a divorce. And he went ballistic. He started throwing things. I had a lot of, little glass ornaments and whatever. He took it and he smashed it on the ground. And then he picked up pictures and he threw them, pictures of me and my father, pictures of us on our wedding day. And then there was this huge painting on the wall. Sorry, a charcoal drawing on the wall. And it was like 2 feet by 3 feet. It was huge. And he picked it up off the wall and he smashed it on the couch. And he ripped the couch. There was glass everywhere. And I just remember I was shaking like a leaf because I'm like, yep, this is definitely the point at which I don't ever want to be with this person ever again. And I remember after all of that, is like he had some sense of realization of what he had done, and he tried to touch me, and I cringed. I remember I cringed and I pulled back, and I'm like, don't touch me, do not touch me. And I cornered myself in a section outside the bathroom. I just kind of pulled myself into a corner and I stooped to the ground. I was sitting on the ground, just crying because I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. This is not it. I can't be doing this anymore. And I'm just sitting on the ground. And eventually, I don't know, I think I found my phone and I called my brother. I'm like, you need to come and get me. You need to come and get me now because I don't have a car. Part of the reason why I also didn't want to leave is because I didn't have a proper job at the time, right? I didn't have a car. I didn't have anywhere to go. So I felt trapped because if I had got left all my investment, because I had money invested in the house. I had money invested in the car, right? If I left, then I lose all of that, right? In my mind, because he was the one who was, doing his stuff, he should have moved out and left me with the house and whatnot. That never happened. I packed my bag and I left, right? And when I left, I went to stay with my brother. And whilst I was staying with my brother and whatnot, and trying to really calibrate how I was going forward. Now, I just started a brand new job at the point in time that I did this, right? I had started a brand new job. I had to start from scratch. Within a couple of weeks, I was frantically looking for a vehicle to go to work because I had no transport to go to work. I had to find some place to stay while I was with my brother. But it's like, I can't, if I'm going to do this, I can't stay with my brother forever. So then became this whole conversation of where would I go? I would have to find an apartment and then furnish an apartment. But I have a house. Why am I doing that when I have a house? And he wouldn't leave. He wouldn't leave. And he wouldn't leave because the house was constructed on his parents' property, his father's property, his property, right? So in that whole, here comes the complication as women when we get married, especially in Indian houses. The property does not become joint with the spouse, right? I was told outright that's his and his father property, right? But I now invested all this money and this effort and whatever into a house on the property. Where's my stake in it, right? And not to mention, you take how many years of nonsense from this man. Where's my stake in it, right? I walked away. I was like, to hell with everything. I walked away. I was like, God will find a way for me, because I'd gotten to the stage and I was like, you know what, Lord, is up to you now, because I know what the hell I doing. So I left, and I was staying with my brother. And one morning I was getting ready to go to work, and I remember getting a frantic phone call for him. I didn't want to take it, but I did answer. And he goes, come quick, I have an accident, So this is coming back to the fire story. This is where he got burned. So I went to the house. I went back to the house. And when I went to the house, he's sitting in the bathroom, and the skin is completely off his face. It melted away with the heat. I went to the bathroom, and I saw him sitting under a stream of water. They were waiting for an ambulance to take him. It was a Carnival Friday. So he's like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I now realize what I'm doing is wrong. I'm being punished. For what I'm doing wrong. I'm really sorry. Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. And so I did. So I went back. I stayed with him. Of course, it's Carnival Friday, so it's real frustration to find a hospital that populated with doctors. The hospital didn't have any doctors. I had to call around, beg around. It got to a point where I had to find a doctor friend who was working in the hospital and get him. Now, the hospital wasn't going to treat him, so then we had to go and the friend, of course, now decides, because I came in the ambulance, I had no vehicle. He puts us in the back of his car and drops us in a private hospital. I stayed the night in the hospital. So he's getting treated in a private hospital for his burns. And I am sleeping on the public couch in the waiting room, because I'm so concerned and upset over what he's going through. And while I am sleeping on the public couch, he on his cell phone talking to this stupid woman, right? So I'm sacrificing on my end, and he's still with her. But you just tell me you're going to, this is, you're so sad, and you're repentant about what you've done. But now 15 minutes later, half an hour later, you're back at it, right? So in other words, that in terms of that story, don't ever believe what they say. If you feel that they're lying, right? So trust your instinct. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to ask at that point, um, I'm not sure I understand why he called you and not the girl if he's with the girl and you have left him.
Right. Well, the reason why I didn't call the girl, one, it would have been highly suspicious, right? Because I'm the wife. That's the
But
first.
you're still married.
Yes, still married. We were separated, but we were still married. But the second reason, of course, is that she wasn't in the country. She's actually for a major part of this whole thing. She lives away, but she would come down and meet him. right? So she would fly down on a regular basis to meet him, or they would go on trips together. So when he used to tell me he has to go for this place for work and that place for work, it's only afterwards I find out it's because he's gallivanting in these lovely places with her, right? They used to take trips together. And you know the worst part? She's married with 2 kids, right? So in other words, she didn't just ruin, they didn't just ruin, let me be clear, they didn't just ruin my relationship, but they also really ruined their relationship and 2 children, right? Okay, so I go back. Of course, he has to get treated and he has to take regular care. He has to have regular care because he has no skin on his face or his chest or his hands, or sections of his chest and his hands. So every day, you have to get up and you have to heal his wounds and clean all of this, goo and whatnot. You have to clean all of that, and then you have to go to work and whatnot, come back home lunchtime, make sure he eats, then go back again, right? And so that was my routine for a good couple of months. Yet still during that good couple of months, I am making all of these sacrifices for you and whatnot. At that point in time, of course you're not working, so I'm maintaining you, right? And it wasn't the first time I was maintaining him. It was a time when he was doing his studies that he was home for months, like 6 months, and I maintained him, right? But anyway, so I was maintaining him, and I did it for a while, and then I realized, but even after all of that, they wouldn't stop, right? They would not stop. Now I want to say something here. You see, I knew of people who, have been in past relationships. They cared for somebody in their past, first love, and all of that jazz. But they realized that because due to the issues or complications or the concerns with that first relationship, they allow themselves to let go of that and then move on to something a lot more mature, a lot more sensible, whatever, whatever. They didn't, right? And I used to think about it. I think I remember telling them once. I said my father had liked a girl before he met my mother, right? My mother and father were arranged marriage. And I said, my father had met a girl before. And my grandfather had said, that is not the type of girl that I want for you. And my father had said, okay, and he had married my mother. Now, going into the relationship with my mother, my father could have been like just like my ex, and decide he wanted to continue the relationship with his previous person. But no, he was mature enough to understand that he had a certain level of responsibility and commitment to maintain in his current relationship. And because the match was a very good one, they really worked well together. And he thrived, they thrived, they did very well together as a team. My ex didn't have that, right? That level of sensibility, I don't know, I guess it went out the doors or window, wherever. But the reality of the situation is that, he kept on for the extent of our almost 10-year marriage. And even before, he was involved with this person, and he had never let it go. And they would always, it's almost like, you have a scab, and you want the cut to heal, but every so often you go and dig the scab,
Yeah, my
and
daughter does that.
right, and you're only digging the scab and digging the scab and digging the scab, and it wouldn't heal. And so that's what they did for years. They dug that scab, dug that scab, dug that scab. And in the end, they ruined 2 marriages and really, destroyed two children. Now, remember, these 2 persons are related to each other. They're cousins, right? So now when in her marriage, when she had to leave her husband for her own cousin, how does that affect her children? You understand? And all of this was stuff I told her this. I said, this does not make sense. It is nonsensible. But yet still, I guess when you're caught up in the emotions and I would call it lust, right? When you're caught up in all of that, all sensibilities went out the window. And so eventually after the accident and after I cared for him and he was able to take care of himself, I left him for good. And the most how should I put it, the most exhilarating and relieving exercise was going to apply for that divorce. It was one of the scariest things that I'd ever done, being on my own was the scariest, because the thing is, I remember I left parents' home to go to husband home. I've never actually lived on my own, never, rented on campus, nothing like that. And I looked at this as an opportunity to say, you know what, this is time for me. I had spent most of my relationship building him up, right? He had won awards where I contributed in terms of the process of the awards, if it was data analysis or doing his PowerPoints for him, whatever it was. He had done his thesis. He also has a PhD. I helped him there too. I was foot to foot with him, but he never gave me that support. Never. And there was a particular situation where in my PhD, where it was a matter of I was under a lot of frustration. I was not getting corrections from my supervisors at the time. And he just told me outright, drop it. And I'm like, but when you were going through, you all were going through, and you needed help, I helped you. You can't just come, in my mind, I'm like, how you could tell me drop it? Because it does not make sense. It is unfair. But he said it, and that's when I realized that the little things you realize that people say. They tell you the words, I love you, right? I love you. But then when it comes to showing that in action, and realize, when you're supposed to support me, you're not supporting me. When you're supposed to be helping me, you're not helping me. The actions are the most important things. And that's another lesson I want to tell people out there. People have to act love, not say love. Because the words I love you are very cheap, and it seem to be like the sexiest thing around to tell everybody that these days, because relationships are so disposable, right? But the reality of the situation is that people have to show you love, act love, not how should I put it? Not say love. So eventually I left. I went up on my own. Well, one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Because I'd lived with him for 10 years, I couldn't sleep for the first year. I also stopped eating, because my thing in our relationship was, we should always eat at least 1 or 2 meals together. And even if our marriage was in ruins, I would say, no, let us come and eat together, because all of these things are strategies I hoped would have kept us together, and you would have realized as being important in our relationship, and whatnot. And, he didn't. So, marriage ended. But the point is, there were a lot of things. And so I went through a really tough time emotionally, physically, mentally. I went through a really tough time for the following years. But throughout the entire process, I kept telling myself, I have to learn to love me first. And then, the most important thing is that I had spent a lot of I spent a lot of time adapting to what he wanted, adapting a lot to what his needs were, and to his sort of sensitivities. Right? It was always adapting, adapting, adapting. So it's about time I adapt for myself, right? I told myself it's about time that I adapted for myself. All that time I spent building him, I now had the opportunity to build me, right? So I threw myself into my profession. I threw myself into, my health, and so on and so forth. And I became, like, when I was married, I was like really ill. I had a lot of sinus problems. I suffered from endometriosis, which is why we didn't have any children. And then I came out of that, and I was able to handle everything, for the most part. I'm able, my asthma is not as bad, my endometriosis has stopped. I haven't, knock on wood, I haven't had any issues with it and whatnot, because I'm able to focus my efforts on me as well. Whereas before, it was always, you have to always be ready to jump every time he asks for something, jump, and now I've definitely said that I've I've fallen in love with myself. I've fallen in love with being independent. I've fallen in love with being alone, which is a scary thing. But it's been an excellent journey since. And for me, the most part is, that learning of to love myself, because he said a lot of things to me. He used to tell me I was worthless and useless. he told me I was less than her, and I don't understand that logic, but how I was less than her, and I was not as good as who she was. And I remember he told me that, you know, I was the worst wife in the world at one point in time through the really bad arguments. And I took those things to face. I took those things, you know, at value. Because for me, because I truly loved him, the man that I loved told me these horrible words. But then I realized, if he had loved me, he would not tell me that, right? Which is the truth. He did not love me. And I later on I realized the truth of our relationship was that I was just a prop that he was hiding behind his he was hiding behind in terms of his relationship. I was a good choice because I was the one who, because I loved him, I would throw myself into building him. So he got more bang for his buck. He got somebody to help him build his life, and then he had his woman on his side. So they were, you know, great. They and whatnot, and now I believe they together. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. But the reality of the situation is that, you know, I've moved on. I've I've basically spent a lot more of my time developing me and learning to acknowledge that I have both my good points and my bad side. And I have a lot of good and bad attributes. And you know what? That just makes me human. You know,
Yeah.
that just makes me human. And I love myself for my flaws, and I associate myself with people who can accept me as much as they can. And you know, if those who don't like me, well, sorry, what I tell you, you know, that your loss. You know, that's your loss. If you don't like me, that's your business. You know, I've gotten to that point in my life, and it's a good point to be. It's a very very good point to be. It's very self empowering, and it's very it's self actualization. So I don't feel like I need to, if I get into a relationship again, it's not going to be because I need somebody, but
Mhm.
that I want that person to be part of my life because of what they represent. So it's a completely different thing. I don't need necessarily anybody to be in a relationship with me, but I would want someone to share a life with. That's something completely different. So
Sam, your story is so powerful, and I hope I remember everything that I want to speak to. But where you started with with your childhood and looking at your parents and that expectation of moving into a family, which me being Hindu as well, understand completely that in the Hindu life expectation, the expectation is that you will get married, you will be dutiful. We as women also expect the reciprocated love. We expect companionship. We expect we do things together. And in Hinduism as well as in other religions, divorce is not something you think about. So even when you think things are going wrong, and this is something I have seen in all the women I have interviewed, the woman always tries to adjust and always tries to figure out what can I do to be a better wife, and how can I help him, and how can I get some of his attention, how could I work so that we could grow stronger together. And all the flexibility is on the woman's
woman,
part. And even when the abuse starts, because that sort of alienation, again, I have interviewed two other persons already, and it's the same kind of thing. The alienation starts, it starts different ways. Sometimes it starts with you can't have no longer have friends, and it progresses to the parents. And you actually lived in that, and that is actually mental and emotional abuse, and is a way to trap and control you into getting what the person wants. And even trying to come out of that and having all of these things happen, it all these stories are so similar. But again, because I guess I relate to the Hindu woman and what is expected, especially being a power couple, or that couple in the temple, and everybody's looking up to you, and you feel you have this role to fulfill, being the daughter-in-law of a pandit. It to me, it is so much pressure, and you want to do it. You want to be all that you can be, all the expectations you were taught when you were small. You want to fulfill all of this, especially as you are intelligent, driven person. You there to every little thing that you can do to fulfill that is in your drive, and then all of these things happen, and you still show empathy. You still genuinely love this person. You still go and take care of the person, and in the end there's nothing on that person's side. And also, I want to pull out that you spoke about how you were ill at times. So sometimes when we in relationships with persons who are not good for us, it impacts us and it impacts our health, and we don't realize. And then when that energy clears out, it suddenly heals. I mean, it might be 100%, but you feel so much better. And even in your voice, you could hear when you speak about the marriage compared to when you speak about now and how empowered you are. It's completely different, and you could hear the freedom in your voice. There's one more thing I wanted to say, and I hope it comes back to me before we end. Um, but I know you had told me too, and I don't know if you could speak a little to it, that you realized you were in an abusive relationship after having gone to a plea.
Yes. So again, I didn't understand what abuse was, and how emotional and mental abuse works. So I was at work, and one of my co-workers was hosting a play, and so we all went out to support him. So I bought tickets and I sat down in this play, and in the play it was about a man who was verbally and emotionally abusive to his wife. And it was about, he came home, and the way he's talking to her, and put the food on the table, and why this food so cold, and it was like a 2.5 hour play, and it was about her being trapped, and how she was trying to, her friend um came over and was trying to tell her, you're in a bad place and you need to find a new thing. And like a new, when I say new thing, a new, like, new hobby, or find something to do because you used to lock up in the house. And I sat there, and within the first 10 minutes I started to cry, and for 2.5 hours I cried.
Okay.
Right, 2.5 hours I watched that play, and I just sat there, and just tears and tears and tears and tears and tears and tears. We came out of intermission, and I was standing in the foyer, and everybody's mingling and whatever, and I'm crying. I'm standing in a corner in the foyer when everybody's socializing, and I just can't stop. And all of the other colleagues are coming, are you okay? And I'm like, nope, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And that's when I realized it was the most eye-opening experience. I remember driving home after that event, driving home, and I'm talking driving with tears, driving
Mhm.
with tears. You kind of have to wipe away tears. You have to, and I remember driving home and going, what the hell did you go through? And, I have to say that I would like to think that for the most part, I kept my head high through the entire experience. But, the heaviness, the weight, the negativity, it just, I sat there and I was going, what did he do to you? He abused you. You were abused, you were abused. And that very night, I wrote him a very, very long email, starting with the play, and explaining that was a night actually that I realized that I was just a prop for his relationship, and that in his selfishness for wanting to be with a woman, be with the woman he wanted to be, but society does not allow us to marry our cousins, right? Or be involved with our cousins, and very taboo and whatnot. But you still want to be with her. So you lie, and you hide, and and you wanted somebody to hide behind. So I was that thing that you hid behind. So that's when I realized all the years that I dedicated in terms of my marriage to him. I remember sitting in car and thinking all of that love and effort was lost. And then eventually I told myself, nah, that love can't be lost. Because I could not, it may have been abused, I may have been betrayed, and taken advantage of. But the reality situation is that when you love somebody purely enough, and the most part, universe, God, whoever you want to talk to, I'm sure that person would have seen the sacrifice and the commitment that you would have. And I always sit and I think, someday, maybe in this lifetime or maybe in another lifetime, um, I would be able to find somebody who would love me the way that he loves her, right? And I'm not waiting for it necessarily. It's not like I sit down and watching my watch, waiting for it or whatnot. I'm trying to enjoy life as much as I can and help people. I do a lot of work with communities and stuff, so I love doing that. So I'm following my passion whilst or I wait. But the reality is that I have convinced myself that my efforts were not in vain. I didn't do anything wrong. And the last mantra I used to tell myself coming out of that whole marriage and relationship is that I am enough. I am enough, right? Because in that marriage, I was never enough. I always used to feel like some circus animal that have to do tricks and you had to get a little treat in exchange. I used to always feel like that with him, right? And now I know I am enough. But I want to, if I get up one morning and I don't want to do nothing, don't wash, no wares, don't want to do nothing, I'm enough. But if I get up one morning and I clean the whole house, pick and span, I'm still enough. So whatever day I am having, however I feel, I'm still enough. But I'm annoyed, agitated, if I'm being arrogant or ignorant or whatever the adjective is, I am still enough. And I think that's the best lesson that I could have gotten out of it. Right? I have no malice to him per se. I just, I think coming out of that relationship, the one thing that has left with me though is this mistrust, because I mean the level of lies and the level of the subtle um, uh, untruths, right? The subtle untruths, I think, has left me with the question that can I really trust someone else? Because I don't know if people will that conniving, you know. Um, but at the end of the day, my lack of trust sometimes is balanced by the fact that I have trust in God and faith in God, that when the time is right, he will always show me the intention. So the time was right in my life, where we were brought together in marriage because we were aligned at that time. Okay. And we started off good temple and we doing all this kind of good work and whatnot and whatnot. But when he became misaligned, it was time, I had to get uncomfortable to leave. So I have to trust in that process. So when I go in future and I get in a relationship with somebody else, and I do have my trust issues with the person, I must never lose faith and trust in the Lord, because he was good enough to save me the first time. He will continue to save me throughout. So that's my fine sort of balance that I find in this whole process. Um, and at the end of the day, I just leave it up to universe. When the time right or whatever, everything will work out.
Yeah, I think we speak the same language because I think you summed up the interview nicely for me. I don't have anything else to do. but 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 yeah, I mean your whole outlook is I mean you are a mature person obviously, but when we think about things that happen in our life, there's always a reason. I mean, it's really horrible, but somehow in that we find ourselves, and we even as we grew up, like for me as well, when I grew up, what the person I was when I was when I was 20 is definitely not the person I am now, and the things I looked forward towards in a marriage at 20 are completely different to what I would look to if I were to get married, if I were to
Now,
remarry now,
yeah.
because at that time is a lot of ideologies and a lot of expectations and a lot of wanting well, at least for me, a lot of wanting to please the persons around, sacrificing who I really am.
Yes.
And I think that is something that not only Hindu women in general, it happens to. And now that we have sort of gone through and found ourselves, we are a bit more fair to ourselves and who we would choose as a partner, not someone like you had said he was insecure. And that stood out for me because in these abusive relationships, that is actually normal that the one of the partners is actually insecure and uses the other one to build them up and uses them to get the life that they want while whatever else is going on. And those things we don't know. We don't really know those things when we are younger because nobody speaks to those things. And which is why I wanted to do the series, because I want us, especially because I have my daughter, to talk about these things. So persons getting into relationships will understand that it's not a fairy tale and it's not what you see around you. You have to understand who you are, and the person has to understand who he is. And that coming together in companionship, understand the direction that you want to take is what really makes a marriage work. But I can't thank you enough for doing this interview, for sharing your story, for giving all of your tips. I am certain that at least one person is going to benefit from your story. I am happy to know where you are in your life. You seem free and empowered and authentic, which when I met you, I always thought you were so courageous. We aren't best friends, but I would have known you a little bit in UE, and I always thought that of you because I don't consider myself courageous because I'm kind of quiet, but I am so happy for where you are, and I wish you the best. I hope God rains all his blessings on you, and whatever you want in life, I sincerely hope that you get it.
You too, Sreshtha. You too.
So for those watching, if you know someone in a domestically abusive situation, you can call 800-SAVE. And if you want to connect with a therapist, I will have the site uploaded at the end of the interview so that you can go onto that website and access a therapist if it is you need skills to cope with a partnership, relationship, or an exit. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, everyone.